You're listening to the Sustainable Angler Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to let everyone know that I created a new website for the Sustainable Angler. It's the sustainableangler.com. You can find everything from past episodes, the Sustainable Angler merchandise, but the thing that I'm most psyched about is the carbon neutral companies page. So this is a spot where you can go and find every business in the fly fishing industry who is either committed to carbon neutrality or has achieved carbon neutrality. So these companies are working hard to protect what we all love, and we should show our support by supporting them with our business. So check it out. It's available at thesustainableangler.com. Okay, back to today's episode. Really psyched. I interview TS Designs founder Eric Henry. We talk about everything from running a sustainable business by using the triple bottom line, which is also known as people, planet, profit. We take a deep dive into the supply chain, the environmental and social impact of making our clothes, how buying local improves our communities, makes businesses more resilient, and mitigates the impacts of climate change. And finally, how TS Designs is the first supplier to join the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance and why that's a big deal. So thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy. This episode of The Sustainable Angler is brought to you by Emerger Strategies, a sustainable business consultancy whose mission is to solve the climate crisis by helping your business go carbon neutral and zero waste. Emerger Strategies is also a proud 1% for the Planet member, a founding member of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, and is also a carbon neutral company. To learn more, visit emergerstrategies.com.
Sounds good. Well, again, Rick, thank you for the opportunity. You know, I've been in the business now for 43 years, so I'll try to give you a very quick synopsis of how I got where we are today. I started a small t-shirt business when I was in NC State in 1978. And I like to tell people things were a lot simpler then. That's before cell phones, internet, computers, even fax machines. We grew that to what they call a large volume contract screen printer. We had clients like Tommy, Nike, Gap, Polo, employed over 100 people here in Burlington, North Carolina. The banks love this business growth. It's got us into this building we're still in today of 20,000 square feet. 1994, January 1 to be exact, North American Free Trade Agreement was ratified. And within 2 years, the brands left and had to lay off over 80 of those 100 plus employees.
Wow.
And to me, that was an awakening that there's more to a business than a bottom line. And so we have been on that journey ever since. We operate a business based on a triple bottom line. We understand the bottom line. Profits are what keep the lights on and pays the bills and all that. But also, what's our impact to people? The people not only at TS Designs, people in our community, people on the planet. And then the last thing is, and I won't say the last thing, but also the important thing is the planet. What is our impact to the planet? So we believe this triple bottom line philosophy is a way a business should operate. Because what has happened in my generation is business has become so powerful and so single bottom line focused, it's causing a lot of problems that we're having to deal with today. And I think one of the things we talk about is climate change. You know, that is, I'm not saying it, you know, climate change has been going along since the time of industrialization, which goes on for 100 plus years. But my generation has just literally poured gas on the fire and made it a lot worse because people are focused on, you know, return on investment or how much money am I going to make? And it's caused a lot of other issues, environment, you know, the racial inequity problems that we're having in this country, income injustice. I mean, on and on and on. But I think by running a business, as long as we have focusing on that, what's the impact of the bottom line? What's the impact of people? And what's the impact of planet? And those are factored into every decision that we make, be it the switching to LED lights or to paying people a living wage. And the exciting thing is there's more and more businesses that are starting to understand those values. And I'm super excited about that quote next generation that are coming on that looked at our generation and the impact that we had, negative and positive, and said, we want to go a different direction. So we feel like we're on the right path. So it's, that's a quick snapshot. I like to say we're focused on domestic apparel manufacturing in both a transparent and equitable supply chain. So there's no secrets of what we do. And we like to say sustainability is a journey, not a destination. We are not a perfect company. There's always room for improvement. And that's why we operate in a transparent environment. We want to let people know what we do so we can learn how to improve, because there's not one person has the answer. Answer lies within your community. So that's a rambling introduction of TS Design's 43 years.
All right. Well, no, that's super interesting, because the NAFTA component of that, where you saw people moving away from buying more U.S. made products. I don't think a lot of people, or maybe some of our listeners, don't understand what happened with that. Could you just expand on that just really briefly?
For sure. Prior to NAFTA, probably 98% of the clothes that we wear and buy were made domestically. Fast forward to today, about 98% are made overseas. And I always like to add the little story is pre-NAFTA, Nike had their apparel headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the reason that is the South, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, that's where majority of the T-shirts and sweatshirts were made. So I think when the people that thought of the NAFTA idea, and I got pushed back because, again, the argument was, we'll let the marketplace decide winners or losers. And I don't have any problem with competition. I have a problem with competitions based upon one thing: who can bring the cheapest price to the table. And that's exactly what happened. When NAFTA got ratified, I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you the manufacturing wages in Mexico were far, far less than the wages in the U.S. So again, the brands took advantage of that, moved their manufacturing there. People didn't realize how quick it was. I mean, it was like a giant, sucking sound, as Ross Perot said. Literally, I was on, ground zero where it was happening. We had the two biggest textile companies in the world, being Guilford Mills and Burlington Industries, were right here in our community. And I mean, it was devastating. There was thousands and thousands of people lost their jobs. Hundreds of businesses went out. And so I don't think people realize how quick that was going to happen. And I said earlier, I have no problem with global competition. But when we talk competition, we got to bring price. I understand that. We can't charge $100 for a T-shirt. But let's talk about your environmental impact and your people impact. Yeah. And the frustrating thing that's been happening, Rick, is, COVID was a wake-up call. COVID realized, there was not only the struggles we had health-wise and people getting sick. We realized the weakness of a lot of our supply chain is based upon a global sourcing, focusing on one thing: cheapest price. Realized couldn't get a lot of things. And then top of that, you bring the ship stuck in the Suez Canal, and then we got issues with cotton coming out of China. We're constantly learning these lessons again and again, the weakness of a single source supply chain. Hey, we just had the big pipeline issue with gas. Another issue. We depend on one thing that gets us to us cheap. All of a sudden it shuts down. And then we're like, we're very vulnerable. So hopefully with these issues so close together that people are, and we're having more conversation we ever had with people that normally wouldn't have. Because it would always kind of shut us down to, oh, you cost too much. Whatever, you make it there in the U.S., I can go it overseas somewhere cheaper. But now it's, they can't get it. Or they end up with, T-shirts made from cotton coming out of China, and now it's associated with slave labor. People don't want to be associated with that. So hopefully we're getting people to start at least, having that conversation. As I like to say, our most important customer is an educated customer. So we spend a lot of time, why are we different? And try to get beyond that. Just, yes, it's more expensive, but it's more expensive because these things. Some people care about that. Some people don't. But those people that do care about that, we can have a conversation and says, well, then how do we make that transition where you are now to a transition that is basically more in line with your values and where you want to go personally or with your business?
Well, look, let me and thank you for that. That was a great explanation. But let me ask you this, because before I got into sort of the sustainability field and working with brands and kind of understanding, I probably have an elementary understanding of how exactly supply chains work, but I know enough to be dangerous. But how does just for the average listener out there who might not have any idea how their shirts get made, can you walk us through that? Everything from cotton being farmed to the store where they're buying it. How does that work in just a typical situation?
Yeah. And even some people don't even know where cotton comes from, but we're focused on natural fibers, which right now is cotton. We can have a hemp conversation later. But there are a lot of steps. And the fortunate thing about, again, living in the South is we grow great cotton in here. And even before NAFTA, all that cotton was used to produce apparel here. So a lot of that cotton, majority of that cotton is then shipped overseas. But what we started doing about a dozen years ago is not all of our T-shirts, but more of our T-shirts, we actually go to the farmer to buy our cotton. And so once the cotton is purchased, there's a lot of steps from that field to that finished T-shirt that I'm wearing today. So first of all, it has to go be ginned. We got to get the cotton seeds out of it. And then from that, it goes to be spun into yarn. And there's a facility that does that, Contemporary, which is that's Parkdale near Augusta, Georgia. Then it goes to Contemporary in Lumberton, which they knit that yarn into fabric. Then that fabric goes to a place in Gaffney, South Carolina, to be what they call finished, basically preparing the fabric before it's been sewn. Then it goes to a couple other facilities in North and South Carolina we work with that do the cut and sew. Then it comes to TS Designs for print and garment dye. So we like to say we go dirt to shirt, and we do it in about 500 miles. And again, in a completely transparent supply chain. You can see that supply chain at Where, WHERE, yourclothing.com. Because we don't grow it, gin it, spin it, knit it, finish it, cut it, sew it, but we tell exactly who did it and a point of contact along the way. Compare that with a typical T-shirt supply chain, which probably uses U.S. cotton because we're known for great cotton we produce in this country. But most likely that cotton will leave this country's yarn, and then that process of, as I said, knitting, finishing, cut, sew, most likely for T-shirts, this is Central America, or it's going to be coming out of Southeast Asia, maybe India, Pakistan. But that T-shirt's going to be about 15,000 miles by the time you get your hands on a big box store. And ours is 500.
15,000 miles. That's wild.
Yep.
I mean, all right, sorry to interrupt, but that's mind blowing. I mean, it's 30 times and to put this in context, just real quick for everyone listening. So, with what we do with my company, Emergent Strategies, and we look at supply chain emissions, you have to understand that a large percentage of a company's supply chain footprint is from transportation. So they're having to transport a product 15,000 miles versus 500. So without even doing any calculation, that has a smaller carbon footprint because it's 500 miles. So anyway, just throwing that tidbit out there to kind of put a little context around that.
For sure. Right.
So back to 15,000 miles, conventional versus TS Designs. What about what are other differentiators? You mentioned slave labor in some supply chains and things like that. I guess part of the social bottom line of your product.
Right, and that's back to this really came even more evident with COVID because I haven't been on a plane now for well over a year. Probably my next plane trip might be in August. So but when they're, when we say 500 miles, most of the furthest one is only like 150 miles out, even that far. So the ability to stay connected to your supply chain. And I like to say too, Rick, is when you develop a relationship with the vendor beyond a purchase order, there's just more substance. I know these people, I know their families, I've been to their business, I've been to their homes. And when you're sending a PO halfway around the world, you lose that connection. And with COVID, it made it very hard to keep that connection because, there's zero chance of getting over there. So, that's just the bond relationship becomes so much greater when you're dealing with a local supply chain than a global supply chain. And again, we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle when it comes to globalization. We live in a world that there's as I drink my iced coffee this morning, we don't grow coffee here. So there's places that we're not, we're going to depend on a supply chain. But it's back to being aware, know your sources. And so we're focused on doing here. But again, as I say, when you have those relationships beyond a PO, then you can have conversations that help move your whole supply chain forward. Because again, there's a lot of things that happen outside of TS Designs that we want to help move in a positive way. And so by making those connections and having those conversations, we can do those things. I guess the other big thing that comes up with cotton, and this is another thing that we launched last year with our 10K cotton project, when we buy the cotton that's from that farmer on that back wall behind me, that mural that painted, is that most cotton in this country is grown in what they call the commodity agriculture market. And people need to understand a commodity agriculture market. That could be cotton, wheat, soy, beef, chicken, doesn't matter. But commodity agriculture means the farmer has zero say in the price in which they get paid. The marketplace determines that. Well, the farmer needs to have a voice in that. And this time last year, they were putting their seeds in the ground 25 cents under their cost due to a trade war we had going on in China. Fast forward to this year, they're actually getting 25 cents more. That's due to the questionable labor used in China to raise that cotton. Either way, the farmer had zero say. He's riding that roller coaster. So what we want to do is show a model, which we did with the 10K Cotton Project, and we're growing it. It's a call to action for the brands to meet the farmer before the seed goes in the ground. Because if you care about organic, you care about regenerative, all those little buzzwords that people talk about, which are important, but first and foremost, the farmer has to have a pathway that they can make money. And they cannot do it through a commodity agriculture. It's too much of a roller coaster. If you look at the big picture, farming represents one of the oldest age groups, highest rates of suicide, highest rates of bankruptcies. And it's because this treadmill that we put the farmer on and the pressure that they're under, because of global prices. So we have to break that and develop these relationships like we did the 10K, where the brands are working directly with the farmer, building those relationships, and then developing a pathway. That's a win for the farmer, a win for the brand.
Yep. That's super interesting about the commodity agriculture. I just don't think, myself included, are not educated enough on how supply chain works. And, a typical decision for most companies is driven by cost and convenience. And that's the same for consumers, right? Consumers are typically going to pay something. I'd like to think our listeners that are listening to this show are taking a look at things other than cost and convenience. And in fact, I'll give a quick plug. I got TS Designs up on there too. If you go to the sustainableangler.com website, we've got a carbon neutral companies page where it is a list of companies that you can find that are committed to going carbon neutral. So anyway, if anyone's looking to support brands and companies that are moving the ball in the right direction down the field, you can find them there. But anyway, I digress. So one of the other things that that I heard you mention earlier is the fact that some your supply chain is traceable, and that's on the product side. But I've also been on your website. What are some of the sustainable business practices that you mentioned it earlier, LED and some other things, but it's I think that's really important to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. So what are some of the things that y'all have done as a business to clean up your own act, I guess?
Sure. And I like to even step back even further than that, because again, these problems can be, when you especially talk climate change, be undaunting.
Yeah.
And people just don't know what to do. And what I like to tell people is we, the consumer, are the most powerful driver on the planet and economy. And being aware, you make decisions every day. The food you eat, the clothes you wear, the energy you use. And if you just start asking the question, the social environmental impact that you're making. Back to the business thing, again, we've been on this journey since the mid 90s. And even before that, we were, I guess you call it, being lucky. I've always had a care for the environment. I had a small garden with my grandfather. I lived in downtown Burlington, so I didn't come from a farming community, but I got interested in gardening and farming at an early age. So that was kind of my initial interest in the environment. And NAFTA just really brought that all together, running a business that way. So, it's the little things like the LED light bulbs, or, we eliminate styrofoam cups. You come to TS Designs, I'll offer you a great cup of coffee. It's going to be fair trade organic, and it's going to be in a porcelain mug that's locally made. It's kind of it is built into our DNA. We've been doing this so long. So anytime we're facing a new decision, a new direction, we're looking at what does it do to the bottom line? What's it do to the planet? What's it do to people? And it's not always equal. Sometimes it's more for the planet or more for the people, whatever. But all three P's are represented. And I think when you have that discussion, like if you just walked out in the hallway of my office here, I can't remember last time those lights had been turned on. It's just so built in everybody's DNA, that they just don't use the lights, So, there's the bathroom beside me, back to saving water. It takes condensation off an ice machine and pumps it over into a tank. And then when you flush that toilet, you use what they call gray water. So what we want to do too, Rick, is just, some people think this is crazy or fruity or whatever, but plant those seeds of ideas, because again, back to, the impact that this would have. This one little bathroom is not going to save the world's water supply, but if we change the way we flush our toilet with this idea, and we did it 1 million times over, that's going to mean a lot less, clean water necessary to do our toilet. So it's just, again, it's usually not one. We do have 2 solar systems on our building. So we do take some big leaps, but really I think it's those little things. I like to say small things over a long time can have big impacts. And again, I go back to that styrofoam cup thing. Styrofoam cups are still legal. You can buy them right now. We limit what's been launched. So we've stopped using them 30 years ago. Imagine how many styrofoam cups we have used over 30 years that are going to be on this planet longer than you and I. And so, that's where it's the responsibility of the business, because some people say, well, I'm doing what's required by regulation and law. Well, that's just the lowest bar. You've got to think beyond that and be responsible and accountable, not only for yourself, but for your business to go beyond that lowest bar. And again, you continue to learn. I used to drive a car I made biodiesel for, put 350,000 miles on that. Now we know, how much better impact an electric car has. So I've been driving an electric car for 3 years now. We're constantly learning. So, we got to be willing to take in new facts, understand new technology, but always go back to that triple bottom line impact. And a lot of times that cool, great thing doesn't make it in, because it happens a lot in the industry. They'll say it doesn't, but what's the impact to the planet? And a lot of times it doesn't make the passing grade. And we don't jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, that, the 3 Ps of people, planet, profit when it comes to sustainable business. And I know that we have talked a lot about the planet part, the environmental impact, but could you just expand a little bit on the people? I mean, we've kind of mentioned it a little bit, but can you just talk a little bit more about the people part of your business, or in general, how that works?
Well, we like to say, people are our most valuable asset. I've got a group of 4 people that have been here for over 25 years. And through COVID, their experience, their dedication, we couldn't have done without them. That being said, we believe never have paid a minimum wage ever in our history, and now what they call is a living wage. We pay everybody, we start at a minimum wage. We look at helping things like with health care and other benefits, because ultimately, if you want an employee to be successful, they've got to be whole in their life. Whole in their life means they've got to be able to make a living wage. So, we look at, our people here, and then we start looking at, it goes back to our supply chain. The benefit you have working with the domestic local supply chain, then you have a better idea who you're working with. Constantly the apparel industry gets themselves in a situation. An example I like to do is, I think it was 8 or 9 years ago, where there was an 8-story building collapse in Bangladesh, killing over 1,000 people. The worst apparel disaster in the apparel industry or history. And people say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it happened." And the brands, the only reason the brands were there is because they were working for 25 cents an hour. So as I told those brands, no brand was held accountable. But I said, the blood's on your hands because you were there for one reason. That was to take advantage of cheap labor. So, we have a responsibility for the people in our community and the people on the planet. But I keep going back to the TS Designs is, I like to say a community cannot be successful unless everyone has an opportunity to participate. So if you are not making a living wage, if you don't have access to health care and things like that, you're not going to be contributing because you're trying to figure out how to survive. And so I'm always advocating it's not only about TS Designs, but how do we make the community around us stronger and better and connected, and because that's what makes us more resilient for that next global disruption that's somewhere in our future, hopefully no time soon. But how do we just do that? But it's just amazing how we have got into chasing the personal wealth side and not really understand the value of community wealth. Because again, and I've learned a lot. It's not about me how much wealth I can accumulate. It's how much wealth I accumulate from a community. This is where I live, and so I need to depend on other people for my quality of life. It's not, I can't do it all on my own.
Well, it's interesting. I've thought a lot about it, from the world my grandparents grew up in, even, when it was, smaller towns and things like that. But I support our local farmers market. I know the people who I get my vegetables and my meat from, but I think a lot of people miss that, where they don't understand that it's like, hey, here's someone in my community that is trying to make a living and is providing a service and a product that I need anyway. So why wouldn't I want to support someone that is within my own community? And I've read a few stats on that, and I can't remember exactly what they were, but basically the study proves that more money stays in the local community when you buy from other local businesses.
Very much so. Yep. It's called the multiplier effect. When you go to a big box store and you might save a few pennies on your toilet paper, but all that money immediately leaves your community. When you go to that farmer's market and invest that money, you're basically giving money. Not giving. You're exchanging with somebody who lives in your community, so your dollars stay in their community. And then hopefully they will go out. So yes, it's a big, I forget what the number is, but it's a tremendous impact keeping your dollars local. And then I think the next step beyond that, and and I didn't mean to cut you off, is
No, you're good.
the same thing happens on a domestic standpoint. There's when you go buy that quote cheap T-shirt that you get in a big box store, and you say you do save some money, but all that money is going to the big box and then goes out of this country. When you buy a shirt from us, then all that money stays in the Carolinas and impacts over 1,000 jobs. So it happens again at a little bit bigger scale than it's the same analogy of farmers market. You're keeping the money in the community in which you live. You're in South Carolina, North Carolina. So, we're in a little bit bigger community, but we're in that community called the U.S. And that's what, that needs to be our next, level where we support and connect to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's a huge opportunity to reduce our environmental impact, also improve the quality of lives of people, and provide jobs for our country by supporting not only local businesses, but like you said, USA made and people who are creating jobs and making their community stronger and keeping money within those communities. So it's a win-win-win scenario. So that's super insightful. So Eric, what are some of, so by the way, I love your phrase dirt to shirt, because you're 500 miles. That's super cool. But also what are some, what gives you hope? What are some success stories, things like that you've seen born out of TS Designs that are making an impact?
Well, I mean, I think going back to COVID, having those relationships in our supply chain, having those relationships to farmers, having those where things come from, it made our company more resilient getting through that. And it made us more resilient, for my wife and I in this community, because, we didn't, the food issues that a lot of people were having at the grocery store. I don't say we were totally isolated, but we were in a much, much better situation because we knew where our food, and we made that investment. We made that investment in knowing the farmers and supporting those farmers. And it's kind of like having a savings account. We made it so we knew where we could get our meat, and we grow a lot of our own vegetables. So we were able to, I guess you say, somewhat cash into that. We didn't have those type of challenges some people have when they're so connected to this global supply chain. It's focus on the cheapest price. So and the same thing goes. I always like to tell the story too, is that we lost a lot of our customers because their business shut down. So we took our values and we pivoted to taking our great U.S. made T-shirts that we had in the back that had some kind of defect, and we pivoted to making face masks. And but we built on our values. How do we make a great product? How do we do it here? And we found that we could be much more nimble in design and implementation because we're doing it right here. And I made the joke, if you make a joke about COVID, but hopefully we're coming out of face mask, and everybody, your listeners have had their shots or getting their shots. But imagine, trying to chase that much, much less expensive mask, let's say coming out of Vietnam, that now is going to take weeks, if not months, to get here. So somebody was making a commitment, back. We didn't know when we were going to be out of this thing. So somebody was making a call back in the end of last year to order some more masks, because we were selling a lot of masks last fall. And now they got, 100,000 masks is going to be arriving in the port of Charleston a couple of weeks from now. And I can tell you, mask sales, I don't care if they're cheap masks or expensive masks, the sales have gone way down. So that's the nice thing about working in a local connected. You're a lot more nimble.
Yeah.
And we don't have that issue. We've probably got maybe 100 masks back here. And if something happened, I hope it doesn't, but all of a sudden masks came back, we could ramp back up production. I could have a couple thousand in a week or so. So manufacturing, I think a lot of people, Rick, they just focus on the bottom line price, and they don't realize all the liabilities of that bottom line price, especially if it's tied to a global supply chain. and what we just went through COVID, you can be a lot more nimble. So to me, it's the right investment. And I see the value now as I hopefully then I'll pay more to give me that flexibility as a business and as a consumer in a local economy.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And something also when you talk about that came to mind when you were talking about being nimble and resilient. And a lot of people maybe don't think about, but I've personally experienced this working for a brand and with some of my clients is you see climate change and what's starting to happen is the increase in more severe weather and things of that nature. And in particular with hurricanes. So for example, to bring this to sort of fly fishing is you had people because of hurricanes there were shops in Florida who were having to cancel some of their orders because the hurricanes. So cancel an order from a brand because their stores were getting wiped out by hurricanes, or hey, somewhat part of our supply chain, the ship is stalled and can't come into port because of the hurricane, so we can't get our product to our customers. So you start to see these supply chain risks playing out. COVID is a great example with everything that you mentioned, but there's also, if you're a brand and you start to think about this, it's like, okay, well, climate change poses significant risk to our supply chain as well.
Yes.
And being able to be nimble and be local and turn things around is another solution to that. But so anyway, I'll just stop there. But that was just something that I've thought about because I've experienced that myself. But that also leads me to one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which is TS Designs is the first supplier of the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. And I'm really excited about that because what that means is with all members of the Climate Alliance, we're guides, shops, lodges, brands, nonprofits, and now we need to add suppliers to that list, but who are committed to going carbon neutral by 2030 and why that's so important. And I think that this is really exciting because as more shops start putting pressure on the brands because the shop is having to account for the embodied carbon of the products that they sell. So if more shops put pressure on the brands and then the brands put pressure on their supply chain, well, inevitably, a lot of these brands will also start thinking about, well, who is asking these questions, like you mentioned earlier from the triple bottom line. What is the environmental impact of our supply chain? What is the social impact of our supply chain? And when you start asking those questions, you are probably going to find some things that you don't like. And by having suppliers like TS Designs as part of this, they provide a solution for those brands who are looking to buy domestic or buy organic or natural fibers. And that's, to me, is really exciting because we know that for most products that are made, because we know that they're made overseas, 80 to 90% of the carbon footprint is in the supply chain.
Correct.
And so a solution to the climate crisis would be to support local suppliers. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm personally really stoked about this. I think that hopefully TS Designs is the first of many suppliers that want to start looking and committing to going carbon neutral. But I just wanted to say thank you for joining in the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, but also just kind of so understands as we're talking about supply chain and what that means, that this is a really big, in my opinion, big deal to have a supplier commit to this, because that means as these brands look deeper, they'll start to hopefully see that, hey, we can do this domestically, and we can solve the climate crisis and support our U.S. companies and local community in the process.
Well, I always like to say, Rick, that analogy, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And it goes to what I said earlier, it starts with education. Climate change is real. Climate change is happening. I remember I was, I guess you say, early on board with it, probably 15, 20 years ago, and maybe the science was, 95%. And, science is never going to be 100%, but 99.999%. Man is impacting. But the thing I also find interesting and alarming when we start talking about climate change 15 or 20 years ago, and I think you're telling me you've got a young child or young kids.
Yep.
And when they started on that, it was going to be a problem that our generation did a lot to escalate it, but we would not see it until many years down the road. Well, not only we know it's happening faster, it's happening worse. We see it. You live in an area that has a lot more, hurricanes, and the hurricanes are worst. The oceans are rising. I mean, it's happening much, much faster than we ever anticipated. So first of all, realize it, do it. But again, I like to say, sustainability is journey, not destination. You're not going to be able to throw a light switch and all to go from, buying everything overseas to buying everything domestic. You're not going to throw a light switch to go from, a carbon heavy environment to a carbon neutral environment. But you just get, I like to say, just get on the path. I don't care where you are on that path. Yeah. I don't care, I'm glad if you're way ahead of me, but it's okay to be way behind me. But I just want people to be on this path because it's going to take all of us moving forward to do this. And the quicker we do it, the quicker we're going to do it. But it's a overwhelming task that we're faced with. COVID was a challenging time, but in a way, it's a kind of a bump in the road in regards to climate change. There was a little, I think some report says because economic activity dropped so much, there was a little, carbon benefit, but the overall did not change the trajectory where we're going. And a lot of people think, we're going back to our old habits. Back to what I said earlier, we're slamming on the gas. Well, that's gas using fossil fuel. We've got to change, and identifying it and then embracing it. And then again, it's taking small steps, but we all have to participate in this if we got a snowball's chance in correcting this for your child's future.
That's exactly right. And that's definitely motivation for me. I've got a 2.5-year-old daughter and a 5-month-old son. And,
yep.
I want to be able to go fishing with them. And I want to be able to, if I'm blessed to have grandchildren, I want to take them fishing, and I want to get them to experience nature and this beautiful planet that we live on. And in order for that to happen, we have got to, as a global community, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but it starts with the individual and it starts with the company, and everyone has to make that decision. So I think that, to your point, I think that you nailed it when you said, it doesn't matter where you are, just take the step, and realize that, hey, okay, we can do things differently, and it's okay. We need lots of imperfect solutions. This is an all hands on deck situation. So I think that's love that point that you made.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that may be actually a pretty good note to wrap on, Eric. And I didn't, unless you had anything else you'd like to add here at the end.
No, again, Rick, I just appreciate the opportunity reaching out. This is just another group of people where, climate change should be important to them, but it's also just, it's dots in a much bigger community. So hopefully, getting the fly fishing community around this idea of addressing climate change, look internally at their businesses and how they operate, how they source, how they're connected. We need to make that tent as big as possible to address this this overwhelming challenge that we have out there called climate change. So I'm just excited that you reached out to us. We're excited to be part of this, going carbon neutral by 2030. Hopefully we can do it way ahead of that time, sooner the better. But it goes back to what I said, it's education. We want, you're another platform that's connecting and educating people about the significance and reason we need to address climate change. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and look forward to working not only with you, but your organization as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Eric. One thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, where can people learn more about TS Designs? What's your website so that they can go and check y'all out?
Sure. I mean, the website is TS Designs, which is T as in Tom, S as in Sam, Designs, DESIGNS.com. That's a good start point. Then you can get connected with our social media platforms and then my LinkedIn platform. That's a good starting point. Hopefully within the next couple months, we're going to have a new website. We went through a lot of changes last year with COVID, changed a lot of services, updated a lot of service. But that's a good starting point, and definitely a way you can get in contact with me. You can get my email, you can get my phone number, and anybody wants to reach out and connect not only with TSI and myself, look forward to the conversation.
All right, thanks for listening to this episode of The Sustainable Angler. Special thanks to Eric Henry from TS Designs. If you like what you're hearing, it really helps the show out a lot. If you could leave a rating and review on iTunes, that helps us spread our message and reach as many anglers as possible, so that hopefully we can inspire positive change. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.